If you're a cultured individual like myself, you may recognize this frame. It comes from the anime Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, or FMAB if you will, and is widely regarded as one of the show's most impactful moments. In the scene this frame comes from, Colonel Mustang has just attended the funeral of his best friend May Hughes, who was killed by one of the homunculuses. Sorry, spoilers I guess. I mean, you did have the last 15 years to watch the show, so kinda on you. The scene itself is super emotional. Hughes was super endearing as a character, and seeing his daughter react as he's buried gets me every time. Afterwards, as Roy Mustang is reflecting on the death of his friend, he says this.
Yeah, I'm fine. Except, it's a terrible day for rain.
What do you mean? It's not raining.
Yes, it is.
Oh jeez, give me a minute, I gotta go ugly cry real quick. Anywho, last time I saw this meme pop up, as usual, people in the comments were talking about how impactful they found the scene. Oh god, this scene makes me cry every time. It's a terrible day for rain. You mean you're sad the fascist died? What? Now, the thing about this is that they are correct. The Amestrians are, at the very least, ultra-nationalists. The show goes out of its way to display the brutality of the Amestrians during the war. A war that was literally called the Ishvalan War of Extermination, by the way. Many of the characters struggle with this involvement in the war, having to come to terms with their own culpability in the genocide. As you get to know these characters, you have to face the dichotomy of them being the good guys, but also having the blood of innocent people on their hands. It's a great show because it illustrates how easily people can be manipulated into performing horrific actions without them having to be inherently evil people. That doesn't excuse those actions in real life or in the show, but it's a nuanced story that forces you to make the decision on how to feel about these characters on your own terms. So yeah, to this commenter, you're not wrong, you're just an asshole. Earlier this year, the first season of Hazbin Hotel came out. I've been a big fan of the pilot for a few years now, so to see the full season after 5 years in production was super exciting, and it's quickly become one of my favorite comfort shows. The animation is fun, the songs are amazing, and it's one of the few instances where the queer characters don't feel shoehorned in or like they're made to be the butt of some joke, but they also don't feel like their queerness is an afterthought. It's a great show, and I like it a lot. So yeah, if you were here for a review, that's it. It's good, and I liked it a lot. Bye! However, despite my overall positive feelings towards the show, something that always bothers me on rewatches is just how much happens in such a short runtime. You've got multiple characters, all with their own plot lines to follow. It ends up making the season feel really oddly paced at times, and results in major character beats being either rushed through or just not touched on at all. One of the most obvious examples of this happens in the episode Welcome to Heaven, in which Charlie and Vaggie finally get the opportunity to pitch the hotel to the Seraphim Council. Up to this point, Charlie has only ever been able to talk to Adam, first man and leader of the angelic army that carries out the exterminations, and he's been less than helpful. So Charlie gets her father Lucifer to set up a meeting with those in charge of Heaven to try and get the next extermination postponed. Before they get to the meeting, however, Adam pays Vaggie a visit, informing her that he knows she's actually an angel and was formerly one of the exterminators of his army. Now, if Vaggie doesn't kowtow with Adam in the meeting, he's gonna tell Charlie that she was one of the angels slaughtering her people. Oh no! Conflict! Later, at that hearing, Adam gives Vaggie the chance to speak against the hotel. Vaggie then responds by fucking off.
What do you think?
I need to use the bathroom.
Seriously, she just straight up leaves for 5 minutes and lets Charlie do all the talking. The obvious problem here is that Vaggie never actually makes a decision. The show literally throws her a Hail Mary to avoid having to face this moral dilemma. It's a frustrating way to resolve the tension established in the previous scene, making the story beat itself feel a bit forced. Of course, I'm not the first person to point this out. Both Saberspark and Sarcastic Chorus touched on it in their respective videos on the show. However, I think this decision feels particularly egregious to me personally because it removes Vaggie's agency in a way that fundamentally undermines the show's themes. See, at its core, Hazbin Hotel is all about redemption. Even Charlie, who most of the time appears to be the perfect princess of hell, has the actions of her parents on her conscience. Charlie's father Lucifer essentially doomed a large portion of humanity to hell by introducing them to free will. Meanwhile, her mother Lilith was the reason the extermination was started in the first place, after she raised an army to challenge heaven. So, in a way, the hotel is Charlie's attempt to atone for the actions of her parents while rescuing her people from the exterminations. Every character has something they have to overcome in their own quest for salvation, but when it comes to Vaggie's redemption, it's a little confusing. On one hand, she legitimately seems remorseful for her involvement in the exterminations, but this often reads as having more to do with her romantic involvement with Charlie rather than any commitment to the other sinners. After all, these are Charlie's people she's been slaughtering. She clearly cares about them for Charlie's sake if nothing else, but when it comes to the day-to-day interactions, Vaggie seems to find the sinners more annoying than anything. She believes in Charlie, but not always in Charlie's cause. And that's what almost made this scene in Heaven powerful. This was a moment for Vaggie to make it clear where she stood in an event where she would face some serious repercussions for choosing to defend the sinners, and would show that she had a real commitment to the hotel. It was a moment of clarity pre-set up for them and would have been super easy to do, but they just didn't. So then, why was this choice made? The easy answer would be to simply say the writing's bad. Vivian Medrano, aka Vivziepop, clearly struggles a bit when it comes to writing her shows, and this is just another instance of that. So there you go, mystery is solved, you can all go now. But personally, I don't find this answer satisfying, even if it is potentially the right one. Given the apparent trajectory of this plot point, having Vaggie choose to back up Charlie would be the natural conclusion to the episode. It wouldn't surprise me if in an earlier version of the script they had followed through with that plot point. I can't help but think that ultimately this was a creative choice, and even objectively wrong creative choices are still choices, so I wanted to see if I could follow this thread anywhere. So that's what I did. Part of what makes Hazbin Hotel so interesting to me is its depiction of heaven and hell. I honestly find any literary depictions of the afterlife interesting, whether it's shows like Lucifer or The Good Place, classic pieces like Dante's Inferno, or even the parables that Jesus told, such as The Rich Man and Lazarus. This parable features hell as a burning pit directly visible from a heaven-esque location referred to as Abraham's bosom, where all the good people just kind of hang out and have a feast, which must be super awkward the whole time. Enjoy your meal, everyone. Please disregard the man being burned alive. The main reason I find these different depictions of hell interesting is how they force the authors to present their perceptions of morality in cut and dried ways. Most of the time, morality is kind of a messy subject. Discussions about morality inevitably end up confusing as they get skewed by our own goals and biases, but when you're forced to imagine a world where a final judgment has been made, you're forced to think of good and evil in much more rigid terms. In cases like The Good Place, this idea of an eternal punishment based on a finite life is explored directly, with the characters concluding ultimately that the system of eternal punishment in hell is ethically wrong and should end. Much like in Hazbin Hotel, this is argued to be the case because humans can change. With enough guidance and support, people can get better and obtain redemption. In Christianity, redemption is generally understood to be something unattainable within the human framework. God is perfect, and humans are icky and gross.
Humans are full of secret nasties. It's why so many of them end up here.
So, unfortunately, without Christ's sacrifice, humans are ultimately fucked. So, thanks, J-Man, you did us a real solid there. However, something that's also pretty much universal in Christian theology is that this redemption is reserved for during your lifetime, and after death, you're pretty well fucked. Sorry, I'm gonna be honest, I find this idea personally to be philosophically unjustifiable. It doesn't matter the extent of your misdeeds during your life, there's nothing that could justify an infinite punishment for a finite crime. But, of course, that's just my opinion, do with it what you will. But it sure seems like Charlie also agrees with me. Charlie sees the way the sinners in hell are treated and says, you know what? No, these people aren't beyond redemption. They don't deserve an eternity in hell and or getting killed. I believe they can be redeemed. The question then is, what does redemption actually look like? It's something I spent a lot of time thinking about because, frankly, I'm not sure I've ever seen it happen. In everyday life, most people are, simply put, pretty decent human beings. Sometimes selfish, but overall fine. But on a broader scale, this kind of thinking falls apart. In light of the Hitlers and Epsteins of the world, it's much harder to dismiss them as flawed human beings rather than psychopaths and monsters seemingly hell-bent on hurting as many people as possible. These folks surely aren't worth redeeming, right? Right? Well, Charlie would argue that, yes, not only can they be redeemed, they should be. Vivian has talked a bit about her goals with Hazbin Hotel, in particular as an opportunity to display characters who are flawed but not beyond redemption. In Vivziepop's own words, people in the digital age have lost sight of second chances and the ability for people to do egregious things but still be worth giving forgiveness.
I feel like second chances are something, especially in the social media world and the world we live in, that is something people are starting to lose sight of and not kind of internalize that idea that people can be flawed and can make mistakes and can grow from them and become better people, and sometimes it's the support and love that they need to get out of those dark places. And I feel like my takeaway is I want more stories like this that allow characters and people to be flawed.
At this point, most of you are probably familiar with the term cancel culture. Personally, I don't really like the term, as at this point, I feel like it's simultaneously used to defend celebrities and politicians who see very little real-world consequences, along with internet creators who very often do face real physical and mental issues when these cancellations happen. There just seems to be too much of a difference between a powerful person with a whole team of PR professionals and lawyers versus a smaller creator whose life can get affected. I don't know. I guess I get tired of every comedian telling me how canceled they are in the middle of their Netflix special. To be fair, I am being a bit pedantic here. After all, regardless of politics and social agendas different groups may have, cancel culture has become an instrumental part of how we navigate our understanding of people near us who fuck up. So I think it's worth talking about. For example, recently, the YouTuber Cody Ko faced a ton of backlash after it came out that he had sex with YouTuber Tana Mojo when she was underage. This controversy didn't pick up steam for quite a while, as, to be honest, a lot of people just didn't like Tana. She was perceived as annoying, a bit promiscuous, plus she'd said the N-word once, so how could she ever be a victim? Ironically, the fall of Cody Ko has, in a way, allowed Tana to rise back up in the public's favor. Suddenly, she's seen as someone who was violated, manipulated, and deserves justice, and I agree with that. However, I do worry about the ways in which this justice is reached. Does Cody deny everything and leave people to choose sides? Does he issue an apology and wait a few years to come back as a new man? Or does Cody leave YouTube and never come back? Either way, it doesn't do much beyond serving as a warning to others that they'd better stay in line or else. And then what of Tana? Is being the victim herself enough for everyone to forgive her and just move on undeterred by her past behavior? The difficulty of any redemption for either Cody or Tana at this point is it relies wholly on whether they are perceived to have changed. As Charlie says, redemption starts with sorry, just not the kind sung on a ukulele. On such a public scale, with entire careers at stake, how could we ever know that these apologies are sincere? Are these apologies more likely to be acceptable because they come from two white people ripe for redemption? Or is the public backlash just there to allow us to feel morally superior? Or, as Pearl Davis said, I'm not saying Hitler wasn't a bad guy, but I really want to know why. Was it because he killed thousands? The world may never know. Returning to Hazbin, we can see a lot of the same mindset in Adam and those on the Heaven Council. They see themselves as the chosen few, the cream of the crop, and yet they struggle to pin down exactly why that is, and why the sinners in Charlie's Hotel are past redemption. Heaven and Hell is very hierarchical in the Hazbin Hotel universe. It's made up of 7 rings, the lowest which is reserved for the sinners. Sinners are seen as the lowest form, but even among them there's room for derision. Angel Dust, for example, is often denigrated by the other sinners for being too slutty, despite them also being sinners. Angel is a victim, sure, but he's also gay, a bit promiscuous, and often doesn't respect others' boundaries, so yeah, he deserves it. In a way, Charlie's Hotel doesn't just challenge the idea of eternal damnation, but also strikes at the core of Heaven's bigoted ideals and hypocrisy. Vivziepop has talked a little bit about another adult animated series, Bojack Horseman, as a point of inspiration for writing Hazbin. Specifically, she cites it as an example where a character is flawed, but not beyond redemption.
One of my favorite shows is Bojack Horseman, which I feel like is a really amazing show about concepts like that. Concepts like, atonement, but also, forgiveness and things like that. So I don't know. I hope people take away that, being kinder to each other and supporting each other and allowing people to grow is a very important thing in this world.
Now, if I'm being honest here, I don't think I agree with Vivian's framing of Bojack's arc. Obviously, media is subjective and everyone's going to perceive stories differently, but to me, I never thought of Bojack as simply a flawed character in need of support in order to redeem himself. Rather, he's an actively toxic person who repeatedly hurts the people around him. Every romantic partner he has throughout the show comes away worse for wear. He repeatedly hurts people that are close to him, like Todd, and when called out for it, often resorts to either the defense of being a good person deep down inside, or else he just goes on about how messed up he is. You can't hold Bojack responsible for the things he does, that's just who he is.
You can't keep doing shitty things and then feel bad about yourself like that makes it okay. You need to be better.
Bojack's ability to get away with his actions stems directly from his star status and the indifference of most folks around him. In the final season, it seems like Bojack may be getting his happy ending. He's gotten sober, started teaching at a college, and finally feels like he's having a positive impact on the world for the first time. Everything's set up for that perfect Hollywood sitcom ending until Bojack's past starts to catch up with him.
The reporters who keep trying to get Penny to tell her story.
What reporters?
Whatever they're doing, I don't want to be included, okay?
Charlotte, I swear I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, you better figure it out.
In light of this impending expose, Bojack goes into damage control. He shifts from teaching to crafting a palatable media response. He starts doing stand-up again, sharing his experience of going sober. He even does an interview where he comes across as genuinely remorseful. Still, Bojack being Bojack, he ends up being really into all the extra attention he's getting and eventually lets it slip that he's not the victim in all this and is way worse than just an alcoholic actor. Bojack is a villain. And villains don't get happy endings. They get shunned. What makes Bojack Horseman so much more compelling as a character compared to, say, Vaggie or Angel Dust is that he's genuinely a messed up guy. He's humanized in a way that really makes you root for him to redeem himself, while at the same time doing some truly horrendous shit, like including but not limited to sleeping with underage girls, betraying his best friend to keep his role on the show, bullying his roommate Todd multiple times throughout the series, and sleeping with and providing drugs to his former child co-star, ultimately causing her death. So while at his core Bojack seems like someone meant to be pitied and a victim of his upbringing, he's by no means a good person, and that forces you to really ask yourself whether he even should get a redemption. Maybe Bojack is too far gone. Maybe it'd be easier if he just died and we wouldn't have to worry about him anymore. But Bojack Horseman as a show isn't interested in these easy answers. One of the show's final lines really stands out to me in this regard. Life's a bitch and then you keep living. It's so ambiguous and open-ended compared to just ending with Bojack's death, because, you know, that'd be too easy. Bojack does end up going to prison, but while he's there, he forms a connection with the other inmates. It even seems like the folks of Hollywood, or Hollywoo, have moved on enough for him to potentially get back into acting once he's released. But the darkness that lives inside Bojack is still there, still threatens to rear its ugly head and hurt those he claims to care about. In the end, Bojack gets a redemption of sorts, but there's no amendment to what he's done, and nothing to change who he is, and yet we still hope. Somehow, we still care. I can't help but compare this kind of character to the kind of characters seeking redemption in Hazbin Hotel. For all this talk about the importance of forgiveness and leaving room for redemption, Hazbin does a lot of telling, but not much showing. To be fair, the show's only on its first season, so there's still potential for this being explored, but look at what the show presents as the unlikely to get redeemed. A gambling addict and heavy drinker, a goofy inventor turned warlord, and a porn star. Not exactly the contenders for hell's worst denizens in my book. You want to maybe challenge your own show's premise? Have Charlie actually face some doubts about her own convictions. How about you have the character she trusts the most go against her in an attempt to save their relationship? Oh, snap! A character being selfish? Doing the wrong thing in your show about selfish and wrong people being worthy of redemption? Instead, they chose this milquetoast path where Vaggie sort of takes this third option. She couldn't have backed up Charlie in the hearing because then she'd just be a perfect character, and there was supposed to be this commentary on flawed characters. But they also apparently didn't want to commit to making Vaggie do the unthinkable and tell the council that she didn't think the sinners could be redeemed, because then we'd have to actually think about stuff. Now, if I'm being generous, and I'm genuinely trying to be, I don't think Hazbin is completely devoid of any substance here. Hazbin Hotel wants to be a show that challenges some assumptions about what it means to be a good person, and for better or worse, this episode in Heaven is the closest it got to touching on that point. In the following episode, Hello Rosie, Charlie and Vaggie aren't on good terms. Charlie knows she's an angel and feels betrayed that Vaggie never told her. She expresses this to Rosie, the leader of Hell's Cannibal Club, and Rosie advises Charlie, essentially, not to worry about what words Vaggie says, but instead to look at the actions she's taken to atone for her past. In the end, Charlie and Vaggie make up, not by apologizing or explaining their actions to each other, but by a simple exchange, Charlie bringing back a souvenir for Vaggie, showing that she was still thinking about her, and that she still cares. It's a sweet moment, and one that I'm not keen to spoil, but I don't know, I can't help but compare it to a similar instance in the second season of Steven Universe, where Pearl tricks Garnet into fusing with her. If you haven't watched the show, you probably don't know what any of that means, but for our purposes, it's not really important. See, that was a betrayal that was sewn deep into each character. Garnet is a literal relationship, so fusing is in many ways sacred to her, and Pearl is often insecure about being alone, often resorting to seeking validation from others for approval. So when these characters fell out in this way, it mattered. It wasn't resolved by a quick monologue of, well, Pobody's nerfed, let's just buy her a keychain. This was a conflict that forced both characters to face an aspect of themselves and took multiple episodes to fully resolve, and it ultimately did so in a super satisfying way. Hazbin Hotel, at least in its current form, wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to have fun, lovable characters while also pretending that they're actually really flawed and that the show is genius and a super inspiring journey of growth for each character, despite never getting to see that growth for ourselves. It wants to tell you that Angel has been making all this great progress without ever showing you any of it. Instead, he just kind of goes from a porn star who doesn't care to a porn star who does, over the course of a single episode, I might add. Look, there are dozens of YouTube videos complaining about Hazbin Hotel in relation to better written shows, and that's annoying and not really what I'm here for. Hazbin has the incredible difficult task of covering a lot of characters and story beats in a very short runtime compared to longer shows like Steven Universe, Avatar: The Last Airbender, or Bojack Horseman, all of which were slow burns that had plenty of time to get their points across. Every animated show, especially nowadays with studios axing projects on a whim, operates based on the assumption that there may not be a next season. Vivziepop clearly wanted to make sure that she got to tell at least some version of the full story within the limited time she was given, and I can't really fault her for that, but at the same time, I want the show to do better, because I see the potential and I see the intention behind a lot of decisions that were made. Hazbin Hotel is at its core a fun, silly show most of the time, but it's also a show that at least tries to imagine a world where no one is beyond redemption. This may be easy to accept for someone who is abused like Angel Dust or a victim of an addiction like Husker, but is it still possible for, say, a British general who lived during Britain's apartheid rule over India? Well, Hazbin Hotel says absolutely he can, and I think that's great. So now we come face to face with the ultimate question. Can we sympathize with the fascist when Maze Hughes dies, leaving behind his wife and daughter? Are we wrong to feel sad? Honestly, I don't think it's my place to say. The cognitive dissonance faced when you realize that a character is not just flawed, but has partaken in some truly horrendous actions is a powerful feeling. It shouldn't be dismissed outright. I don't want to give anyone permission to engage with these stories uncritically. But simultaneously, I think that the moment you other a group of people to the point where you don't even see them as human, you failed on a fundamental level. If you watch this scene in Fullmetal Alchemist and don't feel anything because Maze Hughes was a fascist or something, your brain's messed up. Think about it like the father who was abused as a child and now abuses his own children. That doesn't excuse the abuse he's inflicted on his children. That father is still ultimately responsible for his actions. But pretending those actions exist in a vacuum, or fell out of the coconut tree as it were, does nothing to help diagnose the underlying issues of how we got here in the first place and how we can do better. I've been thinking a lot about the late great Michael Brooks, especially this past year, and something he'd say on multiple occasions really strikes me as particularly poignant to this situation. Be ruthless to institutions and kind to individuals.
I want the left to have the strategy, the ruthlessness, the clarity to actually win these battles and be ruthless with institutions. And then I want us to learn how to be really kind to each other welcoming of a broad set. That's why the cancel stuff is relevant that Katie brought up, because it's a stand-in for this eliminationism of other humans, which is neoliberalism enacted. We're the people who sit around and we say, why don't we have a world where there's no prisons? Okay. That's a radical fucking statement. But then, on the other hand, oh, well, these people could never be part of our coalition because they made a mistake or said something. Like, it's a contradiction in what we're enacting.
Now, I do not by any means have the high ground here. I've spent a lot of time in the past making angry retweets, ripping into conservatives. After taking a break from Twitter and eventually moving to Threads and Blue Sky, I've been shocked at how fast the old habits have come back. And of course, I'm not here to tell you that you shouldn't get angry at conservatives. One could argue that it's your moral imperative to do so. But I believe there's room for passion and anger while still preserving our sense of shared humanity. If you say all the right things and have woke beliefs, but send people death threats or resort to misogyny or racist rhetoric when dealing with women or people of color who disagree with you, you're not woke. Or maybe you are, but there has to be something more. Looking back, I think this anger, for myself at least, comes from a sense of frustration over my own shitty beliefs years ago. I was a 17-year-old edgy teen with not great views about women and LGBTQ people, so when I fell into new atheism in 2019, I could have very easily gone down a path of misogyny and anti-trans bigotry were it not for the few people in my small circle of acquaintances pushing me in a more positive direction. I know the loneliness inherent to far-right manospheres because I felt it. So now, when I see YouTubers I used to watch spreading reactionary rhetoric, I know I would have ended up using it, and I want to punch my younger self in the face. But it's that energy that makes myself and others so vitriolic towards others online. Maybe to start to forgive others, we need to first forgive ourselves? It starts with sorry, after all. Those of us who come out of right-wing circles know redemption is possible because it happened to us. We shouldn't be on the front lines telling people off for not being woke in the acceptable way. We should be looking for ways to build stronger communities and reach out to people on the cusp of falling into these ultra-right-wing camps. To be clear, I'm not suggesting that white supremacists would just change their minds if we were nice to them on Twitter, or that we should change our opinions on women or trans rights so as not to hurt our optics. We won't be able to reach everyone, and there will inevitably be heated disagreements even within our own group, but that's okay because we aren't part of an establishment. We're something new that gets to define itself as we go. The left will never be a monolith, and honestly, I think that's a good thing. Whatever the left does become in the future years, I look forward to maybe helping shape it in some small way. But more than anything, I hope we can unite more people into maybe moving politics in a more positive direction. Please and thank you. Also, before I end, I'd like to clarify, as far as I know, none of the creators of Hazbin Hotel, including Vivziepop herself, have any super leftist political beliefs. They seem like a diverse set of folks who are all just working together to create something great. And Vivian clearly cares about queer representation, and for that I'm grateful. But I don't want to make anyone confused into thinking that these are somehow her views or that she would endorse anything I've said here today. I honestly have just been thinking about this topic for a while and thought I would make a fun first video on this channel. Okay, bye for real now.